This video will consider the cycle of reflection. Gibbs introduced his cycle of reflection during the year 1988. The reflective model is a cyclical process consisting of systematic phases of an experience or activity. So we're looking at systematic phases, we're looking at clear-cut phases in any experience or any activity. And we need to identify these phases and see why they're important and how they link together. The process requires critical thinking in order to reflect and develop from an experience. Therefore, when we have an experience, we shouldn't just leave it as an experience. We should reflect on it, think about it, and see if we can understand the experience more fully and learn from it, so that it adds to our stock of experiences and we can use it perhaps in the future when confronted by similar circumstances. But all experiences should be analysed, reflected upon, and ultimately almost classified within our heads so we can draw them back when appropriate to help us analyse particular situations that we're confronting at that moment in time. The Gibbs model discusses 6 stages for effective reflection, and that's what we're going to look at in this video. We start with the description. What was the issue or the event? So we simply describe whatever the issue was, whatever the event was. The event may have been something practical that we observed, that we were involved in, a piece of work we were doing about the home, or it could be an academic piece of work we were looking into, or some experience, or some event. So we just describe it, just write it down, just make a note of what it was. So the description, well, it's an explanation of the circumstances or situation, and it's necessary to consider the following questions. What was the situation and where did it happen? Make a note of it. What was it? Where did it happen? Where did it happen may be important because the situation where it happened may have had particular influence. There may be particular issues about where it happened. So make a note of the situation, make a note of what happened and where it happened. And then make sure there's a clear description of exactly what happened, as honestly as possible. Do not embellish the event, do not subtract from the event. It's try to report accurately what the experience was. As I said, it may be an academic paper that you've written in the past, in which case discuss how you approached writing the paper, what you confronted when writing the paper, what issues, what learning experiences, what theories, how you went about it. Describe exactly what the process was. But as I said earlier, it could be an event of a smaller magnitude, something that you have done about the house. You have fixed something electrical or whatever it was, and you've made a note of how you did it, how you went about it, and perhaps also some recommendations that should you face the same experience or the same issue again, how you would go about it then. Also describe how many people are involved and what were they doing. So it may be it was a group activity, not an individual activity. If it is, then it's important to describe the group and describe each person in the group and their involvement and why they were important and exactly what their function was. So a detailed description. Again, this may be useful in the future in terms of the reflective process and learning from the experience. And what exactly did you do? And what was the outcome? What happened in the end? And what was your contribution? And how could you have varied your contribution? Could it have been more effective? Could it have been channeled in different directions to bring a better outcome? What skills and abilities did you bring to bear on the situation, and could you have improved that application, or could you have brought other skills that perhaps you didn't think of at the time to bear on the situation. Then it's a reflective document, so according to Gibbs you should have something about your feelings about the situation. Consider your feelings and emotions during the time of an incident or experience. It's important to note what your feelings are, because if you have a positive attitude or a negative attitude, it may influence how you went about the particular task. So how did you feel at the time of the event or incident? Were you in a good mood, bad mood? Were you upset about something? Were you tired? Were you happy? Exactly what were you like? What were your feelings at the time generally? And then how did you feel at the time of the event specifically? Because your approach to the event will somehow be conditioned by how you felt at that time. How do you think other people felt during the event? Were they frustrated, annoyed? How did they feel about it? Were they confused? Were they somehow alienated from the project or the event and didn't want to be involved? What exactly was the feeling at the time? Was there engagement or no engagement? And how do you feel about the overall event now? Compare how you felt then with how you feel now, doing the reflection right now. How do you feel? Do you feel that you went into it in the right frame of mind, or do you feel that your colleagues needed motivation, or something should have been done at the start to ensure that everyone was motivated and keen to complete the project and saw the advantages of the project? A discussion of your overall feelings during the research project. It's important to describe how you felt as the project went through. You may have felt bored or confused, or you may have felt that you were not adequately applying yourself because you had other constraints, you had other pressures to think about at that time. So how did you feel about the work you were doing? Was it adequate? Were you going about it correctly? Were you cutting corners? Were you skimping on parts and not giving them proper attention? What were you thinking and feeling? So put the two together. What were you thinking and feeling? And this would be your evaluation. So what was your evaluation of the situation? Well, think about the project and consider what went well. So what positive outcomes were there? What did you achieve from the project? What went well? What was good and bad about the experience? Make a note of these. It's important to have clarity about what you felt was the outcome, what was good about the project, what was good in undertaking it, what did you learn from the experience, how did you benefit from the experience, and what was bad about it, what issues did you confront that were quite negative in your mind. It might have been lack of data, or parts of it could not be tested because the information was simply not available, or what was it? What was bad about the experience? Make a note of these. And almost above all, make a note of what you've learned. How are you different as a consequence of the experience? What did you learn from the experience? So what was good and bad about the experience? Well, what is your assessment of the situation now? In other words, what's the analysis? What's your assessment of the situation right now? Well, the analysis is analyze the outcome of your project and consider the following. What factors helped or hindered the development of the project? Analyze. What was it that went well? What went wrong? Why did things go wrong? Why did things go right? What happened? What was missing that caused problems? Was your attitude right? Was the environment right? Was the data right? Was the project properly constructed? Was it well thought out and planned? What were the issues that went right and went wrong? Make a note of these. Consider theories to compare your experiences of the project. Consider looking at how you went about the project and try to find abstractions, try to find models in the literature. There are many models in education on how we learn, and models in business management on how to reflect and how to go about particular projects. Look these up, go online, check to see what you can find, and if you can find a model which particularly matches your experiences, then you've done very well, and discuss that model as a part of your reflective paper. And then look at the conclusion. It's a summary of what you have learned from the experience. What could you have done differently? If you were to do the project again, how would you go about it? What would you vary? What would you change? Would a different approach alter the outcome of your project? Would you still get the same outcome even though you did it differently? Or is the outcome dependent on the methodology that you used, on the approach that you used? So, ironically, if you use a different approach, using the same data or the same facts or the same situation, would you get a different outcome? And if you would, explain that. Why does that happen? Why would you get a different outcome? Surely, if you analyze something and you analyze the same situation differently, using a different model, you should still get the same outcome. Or should you? So it's worth discussing. It's worth reading up, checking, making sure you understand the methodology, make sure you understand the situation, and see what happens in terms of your analysis of that particular question. Are there any factors that you would change? If you were to do it again, do the project again, what would you change? And how would you change it? How much would you change it? If you had problem, let's say, doing the analysis of a particular situation, would you want to then consult tutors or friends and who have got an interest in the same area? Would you want to have a discussion with some people about clarifying the theoretical perspectives? Would you want to read up some more, read more widely? Would you want to check the data and the sources of the data and make sure that they are accurate and have got integrity, in other words, that they are real? So what factors would you change if you were to do the project again? Make a list of them. So what improvements can be made? That's the issue that we deal with in terms of the conclusion. It's not just stating what the findings were, but how would the work be improved if it was to be done again. And that's a useful exercise, because perhaps someone reading your work later and reading the conclusion will be inspired by what you said there to conduct essentially the same analysis but conducted slightly differently, or looking at updated data to see what happens over the intervening period of time. Someone may be inspired to do some extra work on the area. So you're giving guidance to future researchers, but you're also showing an awareness of your own limitations. You're being very honest. And finally, an action plan. Action planning and making suggestions for future improvements. As I said earlier, just in terms of the conclusion, this is very important. It's very important to make sure that you've been very honest in the whole exercise. You've been scrupulously honest. You have put forward the models and the data and explained the sources and the methodology that you've applied. You're also critical because you're saying that perhaps there are models and ways of going about it which would have yielded better results or more precise results, or should be considered. So looking at the action planning, you are simply setting out what could be done to improve the work in future manifestations of this exercise. If it was to be done again, this is how it could be set out. Then consider what's been learned and how future training and learning can improve future project planning. Consider the outcome of the exercise. The outcome of the exercise is a greater insight into a particular situation. So how could this be improved upon in terms of future projects? But also, how can the outcome of this project influence the way particular projects or particular activities are structured in the future? A lot of research and a lot of activity like this, looking into particular situations, can have recommendations to say if someone wants to make a certain product or engage in a certain activity, the following issues should be carefully monitored and checked. In other words, there are recommendations here that may go forward to someone reading the project in the future, and it indicates to them areas to be worried about, areas to consider carefully, not to just jump in. So what's been learnt from the whole activity, and how can it help future planning and future research? Think about what you would do differently in future projects. And the action planning should have self-criticism built in. It should have a section on how you went about the project, how you, on reflection, should have gone about the project, how you would do it differently, and what resources did you have that helped, but perhaps what resources that ideally you should have had and you should have marshalled in advance to help you to conduct the project efficiently and effectively. So it's a good oversight into what needs to be done for future projects. So if it arose again, how would you do it? That's really what the action planning stage is stating. So that's Gibbs' model of reflection, learning by doing, a guide to teaching and learning methods, published by Oxford, the further education unit. And that's all we're going to deal with here, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.